everybody, John Greenwood. Today I'm going to be telling you about my medieval Kriegsspiel system. This is meant for about 1000 AD to late 100 Years' War. There are no gunpowder rules under this system. I'm sure you could sort of duct tape some rudimentary gunpowder rules into this system once you know how it works, but currently there's no gunpowder rules. It's in development, but it's at the point where I thought it might be useful to show people how it works, both so that players understand how it works and so that other umpires who are constantly asking me how to do it know how to do it. All right. The first thing to know about this system is that it's intended to slot into my campaign rules for medieval times as well. So there's a couple of weird things about that in the pre-battle phase of it and the post-battle phase of it. I'm not going to cover that stuff. I'm just going to cover the heart of this system, when the guys are actually on the board. So the first thing that you'll want to do is prepare a board that is 2 miles by 2 miles. So you can do this by just scaling up the ruler so that they're, the board is that big. And then what I did is I put a grid projection on top of the board with each of these being a certain distance. I think it's 100 paces here. Yeah. And that seems pretty comfortable there, and then you just add a slight transparency to the grid to make it not too in your face. So the first thing that happens is that the armies sort of arrive on the board based on their campaign position. And one of the unique things about medieval warfare in particular is what happens overnight, and this sort of dynamic of your men camping within eyesight of the other army. This was a very nerve-wracking thing. Definitely gets in the player's head, but it was a super important part of medieval times, and it would kind of be weird to have a medieval battle without taking this into account and without letting the players make this decision. So what my rules currently have is what's called the sentry phase. I suppose you could call it the camp phase. And basically what this is that the players are supposed to tell you where they want to put their camp. And basically you would want to keep it away from water so that it doesn't flood overnight. You would want it kind of close to the woods, but not too close to the woods, because the woods are double-edged swords. The woods protect one of your flanks from enemy cavalry attacks during the night, so that's one of the reasons for being near the woods. But they also expose you to night raids from guys coming through the woods. So you want to be kind of close-ish to the woods, close enough to take advantage of their protection, but far enough that you'll have enough warning if a night raid comes, and you'll want to put guards there. And that's the other part of this is I ask the players where they want to put guards. So the first thing that happens is they come onto this board with an approximate position of their army and an approximate position of the enemy's army, and I basically give them like a big old pinpoint of where their scouts recommend they put camps. And the dimensions of this camp have been, for the sake of gameplay, abstracted to a 500 by 500 square. So that's what that looks like, just so that they have a sense of how much space it takes up. They might in reality take up less space than that, but this is sort of the fairest approximation that I could come up with that wouldn't be too tedious, and then they don't have to manage the layout of their camp or anything. We're just sort of interested in where it is because we're interested in whether there's going to be a night raid and what this sort of means for deployment in the morning. Okay, so once they place their camps, then you ask them where they're placing their guards. So both of the camps are going to be placed, and they're going to know, roughly speaking, where the enemy made their camp. And you're going to ask them where they put their guards. And basically what you want is literally a generic line that they're supposed to protect. Basically, you just assign which units are going there, and this should be approximately 15 to 20% of your force. So that's 1/5 to 1/6 of your force should be guards overnight, just to give a ballpark estimate. The other thing that you can do is you can designate units to go on a night raid, right? You can do, we're going to go through this forest and we're going to surprise them and burn down a couple of their tents, maybe kill their king. And basically, you just, as the umpire, you do this all in one go. You don't give them reactions or turn into reps. You just sort of process the night phase all in one go. And the reason for that is that you're trying to get to the battle phase, right? That's the purpose of this, is just to give context before the battle. All right, so once that's done, you move into the deployment phase. Wargamers are going to be used to this from like Warhammer 40k or whatever. You're just telling everybody where they're going to deploy. That's the main thing. But there's a couple of other nuances to the deployment phase in this system, which is, one, when are your troops waking up? Because if you wake up before the enemy, then you have time to act before he does. And if you wake up after the enemy, then you have less time to act, and he has more time to act when you're not awake. If you're off by like 10 minutes, it's not. I'm gonna spoil it for you. It's not a big deal if you're off by 10 minutes. But if you're off by like a full hour, right, the enemy might be able to walk right up to you. Most of the time, that means you're going to be waking up right at the crack of dawn so that your guys are in position when the sun is out. The other thing that you want to tell is, formation, right, where your guy's standing, who's where. And then another thing I would like to know as the umpire is whether you will take prisoners, because this was traditionally done at the start of the battle in medieval times. So if you're France, for example, and you're fighting the English, you would tend to fly the Oriflamme, which would give the English a signal that you are not taking any prisoners. So your men need to be notified this ahead of time. You can't just decide in the middle of the battle. So that's one of the things that you need to tell me. And then the other thing that you need to tell me is your general battle plan. And this isn't just so that I know, it's so that your troops know, and they sort of know, generally speaking, what to do. And then the advantage of this is that if I know my battle plan is to sit here and do nothing, and I know that his battle plan is to sit here and do nothing, then I don't have to give the players like, okay, 6 minutes passed and 12 minutes passed, and I can just say like, yeah, an hour passes and it's becoming pretty clear that the enemy is not doing anything. Do you change your plans? No, I don't change my plans. Okay, fine. It's noon now. The sun is high in the sky. Do you do anything differently? No. Okay, well, it's nighttime now, so we're back into camp. Have fun with another night phase, right? That sort of thing. It can also let me know that, okay, so my plan is to stand here, and my plan is to march over here and go over here, and I already know that blue doesn't care about any of that, so I can just fast forward the time so that he's over here, and now we all save ourselves a few weeks of turn resolution because I've fast forwarded by like an hour of time, and just saved us all a load of headache. So that's the sort of idea behind the deployment phase. Okay, and then after that you get into the traditional battle phase, and how this works is that each turn is 6 minutes, regular intervals. So just 6 minutes of in-game time, and if you're giving dispatches to another player, it's going to be delayed by 6 minutes. If you're moving troops, that happens within 6 minutes. If there's a melee, that happens within 6 minutes. All right, everything is sort of centered around 6 minutes. From there, we need to get into a bit more of the specifics. So movement is slightly modified from traditional Kriegsspiel. The infantry move half as fast, but the cavalry still move at the same speed. So all infantry types move at 50 paces per minute. So at the end of 6 minutes, they're going to move 300 paces. When we can show that here. That's a 6-minute turn. So you don't move very far in a 6-minute turn, and this is kind of why I want the deployment phase thing, so that we can skip this tedious marching, at least a little bit of it. Cavalry, on the other hand, still move at 200 paces a minute, and this is very trivial for them. So this would be 3 minutes, and that would be 6 minutes. So they can move really fast, and you might be starting to see the value in medieval times of having cavalry. This is their main strength. In terms of routing speed, basically it's just like the infantry route at 100 paces per minute if you need to account for that, but we'll get into that later. And the cavalry route at 600 a minute, so they're like gonna really zip out of that place when they break. And cavalry can also charge 600 paces in a minute. So when they're finally lined up and ready to charge, they can zip into your unit. And again, you're probably seeing just why medieval commanders considered cavalry to be the supreme force. So we have covered movement, and now we have to cover the actual fighting part of this. So that's going to be the ranged attacks and the melee attacks. Before we get into that, I thought I would make a comment about unit size. All of these tokens are based off of real life dimensions of units based off of medieval books of armament, and they give us quite clear dimensions of how big things are. And basically, they still use the Roman cohort system. They would tend to call this a battle. I don't know if battle was a looser term. It seems like it was, but they were still controlling things in cohorts, and then these would be made up of 6 little centuries. Now, the centuries I thought were a little too tedious to administrate, but at the same time, the cohort was just kind of too big. So I went through a middle ground, and now the units are about half a cohort. So if we round up a cohort to about 500 men instead of 480, divide that by 2, so each of these is 250 men, and then each of these blocks has 10 HP regardless of the unit type. So 1 is, and 2 and 3, these are white, which signals that these are kind of acceptable losses or expected losses, and 4 is like, wow, you're in serious trouble, and black is, oh my god, you're about to be destroyed. And then once they hit 10, the unit is destroyed, and it's removed from the board. So that's how that works, and it would be the same with cavalry. It's just the only difference is that they take damage at different rates, and it's all based on conditions. They don't have different health pools. They all have 10 HP. For ranged attacks, it's just a simple question of how much range and how many blocks and whether there's any modifiers. So at 300 paces, regardless of how much time passes in the turn, you deal 1 HP for one of these blocks. So one of these blocks firing 300 paces will deal 1 HP. At 200, it'll deal 2, and at 100, it'll deal 3. So if you have these two guys focusing fire on a single block in front of them, it's going to deal 6 HP worth of damage. There are modifiers. So if the unit is in cover, it's -1. So at 300 paces, you're not going to deal any damage to units in cover. And shields is -1. Plate armor would be -1 as well. And having the sun in your eyes, which was an important consideration in medieval times. Think about this. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So the sun, most of the time, is going to be on this side of the board. So if your archers are like this and they're firing into the enemy like this, they're going to have the sun in their eyes and they're going to be at a disadvantage when they're firing. This was an important consideration in medieval times, so it's an important consideration in the rules. Let's get into melee attacks, because that's the other important thing. That's probably what you came here for. So melee is resolved in giant groups on instead of a block-by-block basis, and how you want to group these is about up to a quarter mile at a time. So if we had, this and this, you wouldn't want to resolve this entire thing as one combat. You would want to split this up into wings, probably. And, you just kind of eyeball it and make a judgment call. Technically, these guys would be sliced into it, but really you're more concerned about, has the left fallen? Has the right fallen? And so on. Okay. So that's how you group it up. In terms of how long this melee lasts, I've made it really easy for the umpire at the expense of a little bit of realism. The melee lasts either 6 minutes exactly, which is a full turn, or until the next turn, whichever comes first. So you should be rolling for the melee result within the turn. So how this happens is 1, you determine the stronger side. 2, you roll 1d6 for the entire engagement. 3, you inflict damage. And 4, you inflict a morale state. So I'll explain how each of those works. Basically, each type of block has a unique point value that I'll call a combat value. And you just add up all those points and see which side has more points. If the points are equal, then the defender is considered the stronger side. In the rules, there's specific values. So ranged units are worth 1, infantry units are worth 1, heavy infantry are worth 2, normal cavalry are worth 3, and heavy cavalry are worth 4. These are based off of the values for cavalry that were given in the traditional Prussian Kriegsspiel rules. All right, so the hussars in those rules are about 4 times as powerful as ordinary line infantry. So that sort of informed the basis of those point values, and then I sort of tinkered with them a bit until basically they felt right. The combat value also changes based on conditions. So if there was a bunch of mud, the heavier troops, like heavy infantry and heavy cavalry, they are worth a lot less. In the woods as well, cavalry are just counted as infantry. There's no difference between infantry and cavalry in the woods. They move at the same pace and they're worth the same amount of points. You sort of tally up the point values of the teams involved. And in this case, we're saying that the men-at-arms and the cavalry aren't involved. It's just these guys sort of in the front here. I've already counted them up off screen, so they're 8 points each, and they're both equal. We're going to say that red is attacking because red is an aggressive color. I don't know. So they're technically the stronger side, even though they don't have a point value. So you just roll 1d6. On a 1, 2, or 3, the stronger side, so red, would be repulsed. On a 4 or a 5, the weaker side is repulsed. On a 6, the weaker side is broken. On a 7, it's broken, and on an 8 or higher, it's shattered. And you can do ad hoc stuff for like surrenders and stuff. And there's modifiers based on a couple of different things, but they're all either +1 or -1. So +1 for higher ground, for example, would be one of the modifiers. So you just roll that. 6, which means that blue is broken, so we can put that on the board. And they're broken. And then you sort of apply the damage, and you don't roll for damage. It's just a flat sort of application. Ordinarily, each participating block takes 2 damage, and there's nothing special here, so all the units take 2 damage, including the ones who were victorious, and that's kind of how that works out. If you got armored units, you take less damage. If you're a heavy unit, you take less damage and deal more damage. Then there's sort of special rules for routing. So while these guys are running away, cavalry can pursue. The infantry are not going to pursue. The reason for that is you don't want to break formation in medieval times until it's the very, very end of the battle. And even then, it doesn't really make sense to pursue the enemy because the cavalry is just going to go a lot faster than you. So you do not pursue in this system. If you're infantry, this would be different under the hoplite era. So if you were doing a bunch of hoplites smashing into each other, the infantry would actually pursue. If you were in the Roman period, the Romans did not pursue for the same reasons. And basically what this is that while these guys are running away, if they're run down by cavalry, then the cavalry just deal a blanket 3 damage to whatever they're touching for like 0 cost to themselves. So it's pretty devastating. And this happens regardless of the unit type. Like they could be running down heavy cavalry as well. And it would still apply. So yeah, that's pretty devastating stuff. So let me explain how the routing states work. When you're repulsed or broken, you run a certain distance unless there's like a reserve line behind you, then you just kind of run behind that. But basically you run a certain distance and then you need time to recover. So here it's 1,000 paces and they're running, so it happens faster. Anyways, so they run back 1,000 paces and now they need 12 minutes to recover if you're broken. So what I do is I have these processing tokens. These are new. And what this means is that there's 1 turn needed to process whatever this is. 2 turns need to pass. 3 turns need to pass. So you put this here, which lets the player know that the reason these guys are back here is because they routed and 2 turns are needed to recover. So next turn they would receive a screenshot like that. And then after that, they just remove it. All right. And that's sort of the routing system. I suppose I'll cover duels as well. It's another simple D6 system. There's very few modifiers. +1 for exceptional gear, like a magic sword, and +1 for renowned skill, like if you were Jaime Lannister. -1 if you're currently wounded. And then the result of the duel is based off of the difference between the die rolls. So here it seems that blue rolled 1 higher than red, which means that he won the duel. Since the difference wasn't that big, he doesn't get captured. However, blue rolled a 6, which means that this guy is wounded. So he's probably not going to want to do another duel. So that's how I do duels. Triggering them is just kind of ad hoc umpire judgment. In terms of player screenshots, I normally just do an overhead thing like this based on where they are. Maybe a bit higher angle, but something like this. I haven't really figured out a super solid way of doing the screenshots, but basically your view should be a lot narrower than it is in ordinary Kriegsspiel. Like ordinary Kriegsspiel, you'd be 3,000 paces, which is just like the entire board. And that doesn't really make sense for a medieval context. So yeah, still working on the vision cone thing. I'm just doing overhead screenshots for now, and that seems to work. But yeah, this is where the system is right now. It's been John Greenwood. Take care.